I've spent the entire week knocking on, our campaign right now is on this 10,000 door knocking week, which means that as a campaign we're knocking on 10,000 doors, and we just might beat that goal. I myself have knocked on something like 750 so far this week, and the stories you hear, they fire you up. Every morning we beat our heads against the wall with whatever tweet has come out overnight, but when you go knock on doors in the 3rd Congressional District of Massachusetts, you cannot help but be fired up. You cannot help but have hope and optimism, and just the same sort of hope and optimism that I get in rooms like this. So very briefly, I'm going to talk to you about who I am and why I am in this, why I have decided to run, and a little bit about my campaign. So I am a Massachusetts boy through and through. Went to Brown University, graduated in 1996. My dad was a banker in Boston. I wanted to be anything but a banker in Boston. So I did what a lot of young 20-somethings do. They try to find their place in the world, and for me that meant driving to Los Angeles. Banker, Boston up here, LA, entertainment industry down here. And that was me. I spent my 20s as a young gay kid trying to stand on my own 2 feet and trying to find my place in this world. And the fact that I just said that made me forget that I forgot to acknowledge the most important person in the room. And that is my amazing husband, Stephen DeVincent. If you haven't had a chance to talk to him yet, please do. He is a veterinarian, which I've learned it's always good to bring a vet to a party because everybody has questions. And not only that, he also now works with elephants and polar bears. So that's even cooler. He's way smarter and cooler than I am. So I was trying to stand on my own 2 feet. Eventually, in my late 20s, I decided that the entertainment industry was wildly uninspiring and I wanted to leave. So I quit my job in 2004 and walked into John Kerry's presidential campaign office, and I said, put me to work as an unpaid volunteer. And in that moment, I finally found what I found to be my purpose, which was, it's the moment I describe as balancing my head and my heart. For the first time in my life, I realized that I was good at something, and that same thing that I was good at actually fired me up. It made me want to get out of bed in the morning and go to the office because I felt like I was doing something to make the world a better place. And from that moment forward, in my late 20s, I devoted my rest of my life to politics and public service, both to electing Democrats around the country as well as advocating for the causes and issues that are near and dear to my heart, things like climate change, LGBT equality, and many, many others. And then, one of those moments that will change your life forever, right? It was January 3rd, 2007, and I met a young African-American senator named Barack Obama. I had a 30-second conversation with him, and in that moment I knew that I was going to work for him, and I'll tell you why. It wasn't just about his politics. I loved his politics, but it was more than that. There was something about him. I felt like he could bring new people into the system, young people, people of color, people who had been traditionally disenfranchised. And I told you earlier that I'm an eternal optimist, and I always want to believe in the best of the United States of America. And I wanted to believe that we could elect an African-American president with the middle name Hussein. And we did it. And we did it twice. And I think this, in moments like this, in moments where so many of us so often bury our heads in the sand because of the political crisis we are facing, I tell myself that it was not so long ago that we shocked the world and we did some pretty special things as a country. We just need new leadership once again to get us back on track. I didn't know, I knew I'd spend 2 years working for Obama. I had no idea that 2 years would turn into 10 years, which is what it did. So I moved to DC, helped work on things like the Affordable Care Act, overturned Don't Ask, Don't Tell, passed the stimulus bill, etc., and then moved to Chicago to work on the re-election campaign. And then the craziest thing happened to, at the time, a 38-year-old gay kid from Massachusetts with no diplomatic experience. The President of the United States asked me to serve overseas as an ambassador. Again, an incredibly inspiring and humbling ask, but after talking to Stephen, I said yes as quickly as I possibly could. And we went to Denmark. So Stephen and I spent 2013 until Trump's inauguration day in Copenhagen, Denmark, serving the country, which gets me to why I am running. So It starts on November 9th of 2016, because Jen is exactly right. If you had ever told me that I would be standing in Bull Run in Shirley, Massachusetts, asking this wonderful group of people to support me to be their next congressperson, I would have said you were crazy. I've spent my life electing other people. I don't want to be that. But this moment in American history is just too important. So November 9th of 2016. I had spent the previous 6 months traveling around Denmark and talking to mostly younger Danes about the rise of Trump, about the rise of far-right nationalism in the United States. Now, they were very, very afraid of this, but they were also familiar with it because Steve Bannon was a student of European-style far-right nationalism. But guess what? And they were very afraid of this happening in the United States. But of course, what did I say to them? I said, don't worry. We're not going to go down that road. We're going to go from the first African-American president to the first woman president, and the legacy that I and so many of us had fought for over the years was going to continue. So there we were, in the early morning hours of November 9th of 2016. Donald Trump was just elected president. And we were hosting a breakfast reception for 700 people to try to explain the results of the election. Now, this was going to be, again, it was supposed to be a passing of the baton. Hillary had actually asked us to stay in Denmark for a few more months, so this was going to be an easy celebration of some sort. And yet we had elected Donald Trump. So I pulled myself together, put on the tie, and go downstairs to a room full, much like this, of great friends of the United States. And I walked into that room, and everything I could see on their faces was fear and despair. And I knew in that moment that something had fundamentally shifted in the US. Something had fundamentally shifted in the world. And that every single one of us had to step up and do something about it. And so Stephen and I absolutely need political leaders who are going to go in and ask questions and listen. And that is absolutely the kind of politician that I want to be, the kind of people believe in the government and the power of the government to make a positive impact on people's lives. I think it's FDR time again. FDR came to power at a time when the United States was hurting, when people had been let down by the system. And he implemented policies that actually lifted people up. They did not point fingers, they did not point blame, they just tried to lift people up. And that's the kind of politics that we need once again right now. Which brings me to my next point. Look, you heard from me earlier. I wouldn't be running if Donald Trump wasn't elected president of the United States. And I fundamentally believe that American values are under assault every single day. But you don't hear a ton of Trump bashing from me. You know, Stephen and I may do a little bit of that in the privacy of our own home. We may do that from time to time, and maybe quite often. But not in this campaign. And I'll tell you why. Because the Democratic Party, if we're going to recapture the heart and soul of Americans, we fundamentally have to stand for something, and not just against something. We have to present a big and a bold and an aspirational agenda that people back. What made the Democratic Party special to begin with? That's what we need to stand for. And we can't just be the party, as Jen said, just the party of no. We need to figure out how to get to yes. And we need to build that conversation and stand for something. And lastly, I'll say this. So I'm a former diplomat, and I really, really believe that we need more diplomacy in politics. Which sounds a little bit like a political slogan, and it might be. But the truth of the matter is it's real, too. It was my job for 4 years to sit around the table with 9 Danish political parties. There was a far-right, hyper-nationalist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant party. There was a far-left, former communist, very anti-capitalist party. And it was my job to sit around a table with all 9 of them and try to get each one of them to agree on something that would move society forward. Whether that was removing chemical weapons from Syria, global climate agreements, trade policy, whatever it may be. You'll never always agree. You will never always agree. But I bet you, with the right effort, you can find a majority of people that agree on something to move the world forward. And that's what we need. That's how we need Congress to function as well. Right now we have 2 parties that retreat to their corners, dig their heels in, and get points, actually, when they don't talk to each other. And I know this, that look, I'm a married gay man. I'm never going to compromise my values on those issues that are so fundamental to me and my beliefs. But I also know this. I know I could sit around the table from even the most conservative Republican congressman, and I could get him or her to agree with me on something. Whether that is an investment in renewable energy. Texas is a very conservative state with a lot of Republican congressmen, but they're also the #1 wind energy producer in the country. I bet you I could get that congressman to agree with me on more federal incentives to help propel the renewable energy industry in the United States. I bet I could get another congressman to agree with me on the value of a more aggressive infrastructure investment in the United States. The opioid epidemic, over and over again. These issues do not need to be politicized. And we just need the kinds of people to go to Washington who are willing to roll up their sleeves and have those conversations. This is what I've done over the course of my career, and it's truly where we need to go, the future of our politics. Listen, we come from a state with a proud tradition of this. Tip O'Neill had a famously good relationship with Ronald Reagan. Teddy Kennedy had a famously good relationship with senators like Orrin Hatch and even at times George W. Bush. These are people that never compromise their values and put country first. And we simply need more of that. We need more statesmen and women in Congress. And that's absolutely the kind of congressman that I want to be. And lastly, I'll say this, my friends. So we're 25 days away from this. It's been a marathon, but I am so fired up tonight like I've never been fired up before. We see the finish line, and we know we can win this thing. But I am all about team. And I need every single one of you to help us get across the finish line. So we're asking you to please help us get there. We're going to be knocking on doors like we've been doing all week. We're going to be making phone calls like we're doing all week. We're going to be driving people to the polls on Election Day, and we're not going to stop until the polls close on September 4th. And we would love every single one of you in this room to be part of this effort. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It means the absolute world to me, as I said. 25 days left, so let's do this. But thank you, and I hope you become part of our team. Thank you, thank you. And I'm very happy to take a few questions.